Thank you very much, Lamide. Thanks for inviting me to this seminar. As I've been introduced, my name is Richard Ajayi. I'm a medical doctor. And when I got a phone call last week to come and give a talk at this conference, my thinking was, what exactly should I talk about? So I decided that the best way to approach this was just to talk about my story. Just tell you about myself, what I have done, how I got to where I am, and hopefully as I talk, we'll be able to pick up one or two snippets of lessons that we may be able to engage in a discussion after that. I'm a medical doctor. My father was a doctor, Dr. Ajayi, I'm one of those people that really didn't think of anything else but what your father did. There was no opportunity to consider being a lawyer, doing business. I just went to medical school because that's what my father did. He had a hospital that was doing well here in Lagos, and I was going to join him. He sent me to school in the UK, but very shortly after he did that, he passed away. And there I was. I'd already started on a course with my father there to help me, but he was no longer around. So what do we do? So I decided in that case I was going to do the best that I can as a doctor and be a doctor and stay in the UK and work. And I started my career. I started working. The first thing, I met a young lady who was later to become my wife, who hated living in England. She's also Nigerian. So, and the talk about coming back to Nigeria really started in earnest. And I started thinking to myself, well, if I'm going back to Nigeria, what is it that I'm going to do? Now, my first love as a doctor was internal medicine, liver medicine, and that was where I was working. But I realized that coming to Nigeria as a liver doctor was not going to look after me and my family, because the infrastructure to run a liver service is such that we just don't have that in Nigeria. So the decision was then, what do I do? So I looked around, and I decided that, well, women will have children every day. So I decided to do obstetrics and gynecology. And when I started to do that, my interest in obs and gynae was also not something that would look after me in Nigeria. That was fetal medicine, looking after babies while the mother is pregnant. We just didn't have the infrastructure. And that is how I ended up doing infertility. Because I saw a lot of Nigerians coming to the UK for fertility treatment. And I said to myself, well, if so many Nigerians are coming over for this treatment, this is something that I can do in Nigeria, because so I went and spent a lot of effort being good in fertility medicine, and I came back to Nigeria with the intention of setting up what was then the first focused IVF clinic in Nigeria. I mean, looking back, I think the lesson that I would leave with you all today is that it was a very big luxury to be able to make decisions and choices about what it is I wanted to do. And I think because I always took my education seriously, I qualified with a distinction from King's College London, and I think that opened up a lot of options, because it's not everybody that can decide, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to do this one will work better than this. But I was able to make those decisions, and I ended up back in Nigeria setting up the Bridge Clinic. Now, the setup of the Bridge Clinic was also very interesting. But before I tell you about that, there's another lesson that I think I can leave with you. And that is a lesson that while I was training as a doctor, we had a system where, as a junior doctor, you have what we call a house officer, a senior house officer, a junior registrar, a senior registrar. then you go through the process. And one of the things that I always fought with, anytime I entered a ward, we had to move jobs every 6 months. It was a decision I made to myself that I will always make my boss redundant. And the point there was that there was no point in saying to myself, this is his job and this is my job. Because over the next year or so, I was going to be doing his job. So as far as I was concerned, there was no better opportunity to learn to do a job that extended my role, because that prepared me for that job when the time came. And that served me well, because having that attitude allowed me to go from one job to the other excelling. And I'm mentioning that because I see a lot of people today who sit there and say, that's my boss, it's my boss's job to do this, and it's my job to do this. I think you want to become a boss. So the sooner you start acting like a boss, the quicker you're going to be a boss. Because if you stay behind and expect your boss to take all the responsibility and you don't want to make decisions, it's going to slow you down. So I think that helped me as well. I returned to Nigeria just after June 12. Remember the June 12 problems. Nigeria was at a standstill. And the time that I was coming in, a lot of people were leaving. It was a difficult time because I was coming to do something nobody really understood. It had never been done before. It needed a lot of money, and I was very focused on what I wanted to do. I mean, I knew Nigeria needed this, so I very slowly, without knowing it, started to change my career. By that I mean I had to meet some people to do what we call a feasibility study. You know, as a doctor, I didn't know what that meant, but I needed to raise money to set up an IVF clinic. So I had to do a feasibility study, a business plan, and I had to go around and try and raise money. And I remember it was one of the most difficult things that I've ever done in my life. All I'd ever learned was to be a doctor. And suddenly, to actually work as a doctor in Nigeria, I needed to find money to allow me to buy equipment to be able to do my job. It took me over 2 years before we started. Of course, I gave up once or twice. I ran back to the UK, got a nice safe job with a salary, but after a while I realized that wasn't really what I wanted to do. I wanted to set up an IVF clinic. And so it took over 2 years of starting. And when we started on a shoestring budget. We didn't have all the money that we needed. So it was very tough. In those days, we used to bring a team of people from King's College. They would come to Nigeria for a week. I would spend 3 months getting the patients together. They would come over to Nigeria and we would treat the patients. During those weeks, I would have to stay in the hospital just to be sure that everything worked out and we didn't put the patients at risk. And that's really when I learned the importance of the word faith. Because I learned that if you set your mind on something and you really know that you spent time and you found out that this is the will of God for you, you need to just stay with it and focus, because a doctor going around trying to raise money was a big departure from anything I'd ever been trained for. I'll go and meet people. I'll never forget the story of one of my father's very good friends. And he said, okay, why don't you come over and see me at 7 o'clock in the morning. 7 in the morning, I was there. I was told he was still sleeping. I sat there waiting for him. Then he woke up at about 10 o'clock and invited me to have breakfast with him. So I came and sat down with him. I started to talk about what I came to discuss. No, he said, no, we have to have breakfast first. At 12 o'clock, some other gentleman came in. He asked me to excuse him. I went into the other living room. At 1:30, I surfaced to say, what's happening? He had gone out. I returned the next day. He did the same thing. So, and the point I'm making that these are new skills. These are not skills that I was equipped for. The idea of sitting down there being patient and trying to sell an idea. But you don't have a choice. I think when you're faced with a situation that you have a determination of what you want to do, then you have to just stay with it and pray that God stays with you. As I said earlier, it was a very slight drift from being a doctor. You started raising money. But by the time you start to raise money, you have to deal with some people. They're called shareholders. And they're the people who put money into your business. And the skills of managing a business are not skills you learn in medical school. So very quickly I realized that I was out of my depth. We would have board meetings and the gentlemen would be asking questions that I couldn't answer. They'll be talking about this fellow called EBITDA, which is earnings from the business. I didn't have a clue what they were talking about. But it was clear that there was a need to learn new skills. So first thing I did, I went to the Lagos Business School and I enrolled on the Chief Executive Program. And hopefully, the idea was that would give me the skills that I needed to be able to engage the business community. It gave me a little bit, but I realized I needed more. So, and this program was a one-year program, and we went for 6 weeks, every 6 months. Then it wasn't enough, so I decided to go to Harvard Business School and do the Owner, President, Managers program. This is a 3-year program. So this is a 3-year program where you go for 3 weeks every year for 3 years. And the whole idea was that this would allow you to learn to deal with raising money and all the things you need to do to run your business. And I'm glad to say it helped me, but not only did it help me, but it also complicated my life. Because by the time you come back from that kind of a program, you start to think differently. Okay, and you don't think like a doctor anymore. You're seeing opportunities everywhere. This is another opportunity. So one of the key things we did, I realized that we didn't have good laboratories in Nigeria to be able to do good IVF. So one of the first other businesses we set up was a laboratory business called Pathcare. And the whole idea was that if we have this problem, every other doctor has the same problem. And so there was no point in setting a lab up just for ourselves. We can set one up and everybody can use. Now, Pathcare grew, and Pathcare has 15 laboratories across Nigeria. And so not only were we managing the Bridge Clinic, which has now grown to 4 clinics, we now have to manage this complication of a very large laboratory business. Now, there were other areas that we saw there are problems. For example, before you can do IVF, about 30 to 40% of patients have fibroids, and they have conditions that need to be operated on before you can successfully treat them. So one of the things we realized that a lot of the operations that we carry out locally, yes, for simple ones, no problem. The operation can be done safely in Nigeria. But quite a large proportion of the patients needed to go abroad. So we ended up setting up another company called AfriSurge to take these patients abroad. We realized that we didn't have quality assured consumables, so we set up another company called Logistox to be able to do that. So what I do now is that from a doctor wanting to practice his medicine, I ended up in a space where I'm managing a lot of what I call infrastructure businesses to support healthcare. Now, these are all opportunities that I think all medical people in Nigeria need these facilities. So we're looking at it as a business, rather than just looking at it from a doctor's position. So I've always found that we've always had to constantly improve. My wife works with me, which is why I keep using we. And after I did my program at the Harvard Business School, I found out that she didn't understand me anymore. Because I'll come back and I'll see opportunities and she'll be looking at me like, what's that got to do with IVF? Which is what she understood. So she also has now gone on the program, and I'm glad to say that our communication is much improved because she too sees the opportunity. So let me share with you just a few experiences that I think probably will be more important to you guys along my journey. And these are experiences I've had with staff, and just, maybe we can have a discussion after what you think. The first one was, to do IVF, we needed skilled staff, and we didn't have this staff in Nigeria. So the first guy we had was a gentleman that we employed, and the idea was we wanted him to learn to become an embryologist. So he came over, the guys from the UK were coming over to train him, and so while they were here, they were training him. And then after a while, he went to the UK and he spent 6 months in the UK. He got good at what he was required to do. He came back to Nigeria, and then we decided that it would be good if he went for a master's program. So he went off for a master's program. It was a distance learning program where he was learning from here, and then he'll go for 6 weeks to University of Leeds. When he completed his MSc in clinical embryology, he came into my office the second day after I returned and said to me, "Doctor, I expect you will now double my salary." And I said to him, "Why do you expect your salary to be doubled?" He said, "Because I now have a master's in embryology, and that has value." I said, "Well, it doesn't have any value. It has value if you applied what you have learned and got everybody that came in here pregnant, in which case there's a queue of patients coming in and we're creating additional value. But beyond that, it's a skill that we have paid for, and I don't think we should pay you for the certificate that we paid for." But he didn't understand. He didn't understand. As far as he was concerned, this is my value, and if you want me to deliver this value, then you have to pay for it. So he resigned and left. So it's interesting, but it's interesting because it showed me that we all think differently. Because we all have different backgrounds, different experiences, we think differently. He's come back subsequent to that, okay, but he disappeared for about 4 years, thinking that it would have more value. But it was interesting that he shared that. The other story I wanted to share also related to training, and this was somebody, after we learned from his experience, the idea was that if we're going to train any more staff, then they need to be committed to the business. And so all the terms and conditions need to be drawn out before they go on training, that fine, we're going to train you to achieve this, it's going to cost this much, and I'm going to give this back to the company. So the next person to go said, "Well, I'm not going to sign that." And I said, "Why are you not going to sign it?" "Well, because if I sign it, then I'll be committed to the organization." And so that's the whole idea of the document, is to commit you to what we're going to spend money on. And I don't want to be tied down. I don't want to be tied down. I said, "But if your father pays for your school fees, there is an expectation that you will look after him when he gets older. So why is it that you expect the organization to pay for it and you don't want to give back? I don't understand this." But hey, we stayed with it. I mean, subsequently we got people who were very happy to sign, go on train, and come back and work. And it just showed me that there are different kinds of people. And there are a lot of people that will cut their nose to spite their face. Because the training is for you. You are going to go away with the skills. And if the people that are paying for it want you to give a little bit of, a little bit back while you work it, I really don't think it should be a problem. But there are a lot of people who see it as a problem. who will totally refuse to go on the training because as far as they're concerned, you're trying to hold them down. And because of that, they will not do the training. And I've seen many of them do this. The other thing, experience is the concept of teamwork. Because you see, when you work in an organization, you are in there not for the reason that you are there. I mean, most people come to work because they want a salary. But the truth is that you have been employed not because somebody wants to pay you a salary, because there's an expectation of your performance and for your performance to improve the business. And this is important because most people believe that, well, I'm here, all I need to do is do the minimum that I need to do to get paid at the end of the month. But the truth is, a lot more is expected than you just turning up. And most people just, it's an issue we discuss all the time. Most people think I'm just here, so if I leave, it doesn't matter. It does matter, because when you've been employed, as far as the business understands, that capability is being provided for. So if you just drop and you leave, it's like going to war with an army, and you're out there fighting this battle, and then suddenly key members of your army just drop their weapons and say, I'm not doing anymore. You're not going to win. You're not going to win that battle. And I use this analogy a lot with staff, that listen, when you come in, you are an integral member of this organization. The role that you play is critical, because if you don't play that role, we can't win. We can't win. So don't just look at your relationship as a transactional relationship where you're here to spend your time, take some money from the organization. No, you're a key member of staff playing a key role. And I think this is important because this is a conversation we still have over and over and over again. And I think I look at it, and one of the things that I ended up doing about a few years ago, does anybody know the game rugby? I got involved with rugby because I decided that the reason we have all these discussions is because people don't play enough sports in school. Because what sports teaches you is the spirit of competition, discipline, accountability, responsibility to your team, to ensure that your team wins. So I got involved in rugby and became the president of the Nigerian Rugby Federation for 4 years, and we were blessed by a company called Promasidor, because Promasidor provided funding to put rugby in schools, and we managed to get about 34 schools now in Lagos State playing rugby with a coach in each school. So the point is, teamwork is important. A business is teamwork. So you can't look at it from an isolated perspective that is just about me. I mean, my mother passed away, a year ago, and I remember I was away when I heard the news, and I came back. While I was dealing with that, the head of human resources dropped her letter on her desk and disappeared. So when I found, I said, why did you do it? Oh no, somebody gave me a job and they said I must come to. I said, but you already have a job here. I'm not saying you shouldn't leave, but that's why you're supposed to give us a notice. Because with a notice, we can get somebody else to fill this space. So, really, what I'm saying to you is that work requires a different way of thinking. The philosophy of continuous improvement is critical because you're not going to have all the skills that you need for whatever position you find yourself. In fact, if you have all the skills for that position, you're probably too skilled for it. Because the whole idea of any opportunity that you are faced with is that you stretch yourselves, you look for whatever resources you need to extend yourself to be able to fill that position. So continuous improvement is an integral part of life. You're not going to do without it. As I stand here 2 weeks ago, I was on a training on investment banking, mergers and acquisitions and strategic transactions. I'm a doctor. Why am I doing that? Because, as I said, I'm now working more with businesses. We have to raise financing. You're speaking to people, investment bankers, who are coming to discuss and bamboozle you with terms that you don't understand. So you either don't understand it and let them bamboozle you, or you look them in the eye and say, let's discuss. And so I decided that I was going to go on a training to do that. So every year I would go on at least 3 or 4 different kind of trainings, leadership training, business training, finance training, just to allow me to be able to effectively do what I need to do. Thank you.
Praise the name of the Lord. We've heard from a doctor this morning who became a baker, who makes cakes. Now we're hearing from a doctor who has become a businessman, an investment banker, and so on. Are there any questions? Okay, please come here. I need 3 people. Okay, I know there will be 4, so 4 people. Yes, come on. Come out, come out. Sir. Come out. Okay, one more. That's it. So I've got it. Okay, don't run again, no, except they're not coming here. So they'll just say all the questions and then you can answer.
Good afternoon, sir. I had asked a question initially, and thank God that I wasn't recognized. Yes, the first question I have here is based on the first fellow who left after the training and let him stay. And then secondly, if you invest into somebody's training, please, I'd like you to please possibly expatiate on how that can be quantified into how long you are going to sign a bond with that person or the person in question. Are you going to possibly hand in part of the business, or are you going to just give him a bond for like 4, 5, 6 years to keep him? Because in the next 1 to 2, 3 weeks, I'll be starting up a business with a friend, and we possibly cannot do it alone, just 2 of us. So we need to train a few people to join us in carrying out our projects, if we have any within the environment. Because with schools, if we are going to be doing anything in that environment, we need to train a lot of people. Now, how do you quantify, the investments you do into training people? And then 14. Now, you've been able to do this for a very, very long while, and I understand the fact that I did attend the training some weeks ago that we're taught that keeping a team is about your relationship with those people. What really, because now we are taught from a book. Now I want to understand this same factor from a real life scenario. How do you keep your team intact? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Timmy. First and foremost, thank you very much for this lecture, and I want to say a very big thank you on behalf of the people you have developed humanly through your own personal business. Sir, I want to quote you. You said something that really struck me, and over the years it has really been disturbing me, kind of. You said if you have all the qualification, you are probably too skilled to get into a job. Now, I did engineering in school, and there are a couple of companies I've been to, and anytime I go there, they'll tell me, go and do this training, go and do that training, go and do this training. Lately, I was discussing with somebody who was going to help me on the job, and he just told me, go and do this training, and the training cost about 3 to 5 million. Imagine me, I just finished school, going to do 3 to 5 million, and it's not supposed to be in Nigeria, it's supposed to be in the UK or in the US. And imagine if I get all this, and you said if you have all the qualifications, you are probably too skilled. And these people are telling me, if I can't get this thing by myself, they can't train me. What do I do in cases like that? That's my question.
Good day, everybody. Good day, Doctor. My question is concerning the issue of employee and employer. When you are speaking, something just dropped in my heart. Something that I got to understand when I was reading the story of Laban and Jacob. We all know this, the employee and the employer and the changing of wages and how he disappeared suddenly. Because when he said the HR lady disappeared. So I just want to ask, because when you look at it from an employee's perspective, sometimes the work condition is not favorable, or the pay, or something that makes them to disappear. And then when you look at it from the employer's perspective, suddenly someone just leaves you and you're demoralized and So I just want to ask, I hope I can put it into a question. I want to ask, what I'm trying to ask is that the labor market, the work environment, what can we do to make it conducive that both employee and employer can, find a listening point? Let me just put it like that.
I would have loved to answer that. It's not me to ask.
Good afternoon. Yes, sir, I think your presentation and what you do is amazing. On behalf of all the youths in Nigeria, I'm presently running a project on mentorship programs, looking at all the Nigerian top stakeholders in the society, in international organizations, in the government, and basically any individual who is succeeding at what they do in their passion and their work. And I'm trying to, my project is on linking people like you with people like us. So I'm speaking to everyone who spoke here, the organizers of this initiative. If you could work with me to link up major bodies like this with people like mine. So I really hope this will be granted so that if somebody wants to be... Okay,
But talk to me about it later. This isn't
My question is, the first person and the third person said something relating to it. The person said, if you said something that if you've been invested in with a lot of abilities and you offer with a lot of abilities, you have to give back. That was the truth. First, before I go to my question, in the ages, we have the master-slave relationship, whereby maybe when the slave, I'm going to go to it. I want to relate it because they are just going to answer it directly and I'm going to be sitting down. I don't get it. Yeah, I mean, so there is part of the master giving away to the slave to free him. But nowadays, it's very rare. So my question is, if one is working for you and you've invested a lot in him, the person considers his time as his life. So with time, when the person gives back, maybe there's nothing to go back into. And we know the youth of nowadays, we have the Indomie in 2 minutes, we don't have the hand. So my question is it really advisable to want to give back and go back and give your time, which is equal to your life, which at the end of the day, there's nothing beneficial out of it?
Thank you very much for those very insightful questions.
one class, please. Let's just listen to it.
I'm going to answer this question and the question about what do we do at work. I think it's a two-way thing. What I always say to people when they complain is I say, well, what are you doing to fix it? What is your recommendation? How do you want to improve the situation? But I can't solve all your problems. Okay? When I leave you, I don't think about you. I think about my own issues. So if you have issues that concern you, articulate it and let us sort it out. That is what creates a good work environment. Because you can't keep pointing fingers that they didn't do. It's what they are aware of that will get done. There was one morning I was going to the gym about 5:30 in the morning, and I saw, we have a South African GM in our lab business, and I saw him going home in his car. So I called him. I said, where are you coming from? at this time of the morning, teasing him that, if you, in 5 o'clock, where are you coming from? And he looked at me, he said, we had a problem in the lab at Booth, and I spent the night there. So I said, wow, okay. Did you fix the problem? He said, yes. I just took it, kept it, in my heart. And a few weeks later, when the opportunity presented itself, I said to him, well, that is amazing work ethic. And he looked at me and he said, well, it's my job. I'm here in Nigeria, and when I go home and my father asked me, what did I achieve? I want to say, when I came here, there were 2 laboratories, and when I left, there were 6 or 7. So it's my job to ensure that the business that I work thrives. It's a different mindset. Okay? And it's a mindset of ownership. And the organization has to create that, but it's a two-way thing. And if the staff are interested and they take that sense of ownership, then together we can create something that works for everybody. And I don't like that concept of slave-master, employee-employer relationship. I don't think it works. I think we should also look at it that we're all here, and this organization is a platform for both of us to develop ourselves. And let's make it as good as we can get it. So, how do we keep the team intact? That's how you keep the team intact. You give them a sense of ownership. You give them a sense that what they say matters. They can influence their own development, so everybody has to write a personal development plan. What kind of courses, what do you want to do this year? Every staff has a budget, 5% of their salary on their own development. We have town hall meetings where issues that they don't like, they talk about it. Because they have to believe that this place this is where I work. So they're not here feeling that they're at the behest of somebody to order them around. So that's the kind of culture that we create. We all work here, and let's make it work as well as we can. If I was able to convince that first chap, would I let him stay? Well, yes, I would let him stay because he's skilled. And he was making a decision from his own understanding. And I don't think he was a bad person. No, I don't think he was a bad person. He just didn't understand. Because from his own point of view, he had skills that we needed to pay for without thinking that we created those skills in him. So if I was able to convince him, I will let him stay. And I think the last question was about qualifications and being skilled. I think you misunderstood me. You need qualifications to be able to do your job. You can't be a doctor if you have not been to medical school. Okay, so you need the qualifications. What I was talking about was more in a neural capability. So a lot of jobs are there to develop, and you have to go into the job to stretch yourself, learn new skills, learn new ways to work to make yourself effective at what you do. But you need qualifications to do most jobs. Thank you very much.